Greetings, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to The Frozen Chosen. I am Nathan Wright.
I'm Caleb.
And I'm Joseph.
And we are here reviewing The Chosen, episode by episode, in a confessional, reformed perspective. This week we come to episode 7 of season 2. Now, we just wrapped up quite a few plot points. Mary Magdalene came back from her relapse, which is fictional but tastefully handled. The Pharisees are mad at Jesus and the disciples because Jesus just healed on the Sabbath, and now the disciples are plucking heads of grain and eating them on the Sabbath. And the biggest way the show has left us hanging so far is we have one Pharisee and his buddy who are trying to convince all the rest of the Pharisees that Jesus is a threat. And they're not having much success because most of the Pharisees don't seem worried about it, which is very strange, and we have a lot of questions about it. So we have every intention of watching the roundtables. We've explained earlier why we didn't make that a part of our review process, but we also said we were open to it at some point, and just because this is the third episode in a row now that has left us with a lot of questions about this. So we plan to watch at least some of those and just see if we can get any insight before we comment too much more about that. But suffice it to say, it seems like the show is trying to portray the Pharisaical establishment as not inherently opposed to Jesus. It's like they have to be convinced. So, anyway, when the episode begins, the disciples are fishing for food, and Jesus tells them how important it is that he prepare for his upcoming sermon. I knew there was controversy about Jesus practicing his sermon and so forth and writing out notes and stuff because people are like, he wouldn't have had to do that. He's God, which he is, actually. Like, no kidding. Yeah, he could have done it without that if he wanted to, but because he wanted to be our example, he did it the human way, and we're supposed to follow in his footsteps. So I didn't realize how big this was going to be, because several episodes now have made a really big deal out of Jesus preparing for his sermon. And I'm starting to appreciate it. I was never opposed to this particular thing. We all have a lot of problems with the show, but this hasn't been one of them. But in this particular episode, I actually started to like it because it's a good example for us to follow. Now, granted, it's not in Scripture, but Jesus was a man of wisdom, and he taught the disciples to be wise as well. There's a lot that the words of Jesus in the New Testament have in common with the book of Proverbs. And so, do I want a TV show to portray Jesus in a fictional way? Even if it does happen to align with biblical values, not necessarily. But I just don't have any strong complaints about this. I think the idea of Jesus gathering all his disciples around him to help him prepare for his sermon, is a good pastoral thing that makes for good practice in ministry.
I also appreciate the prayerfulness that the show shows Jesus in his preparation.
Yeah.
Not just reading and thinking, but
Yeah,
actually accessing the Father through prayer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not listening to podcasts.
No, we would never encourage anyone to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
One thing I'll note, this which has less to do with the preparations that Jesus is making for the sermon in the story. I'm more just the way the story is being told. I don't think it makes that much sense in terms of what the show has shown, that Jesus is suddenly going to have a crowd of thousands of people show up, which is what he says is going to happen. Before this point, in the Gospels, we get the impression that he's been doing a lot more healings for a longer time. He's extremely famous, and people are constantly swarming him everywhere, which is why he has to go off into some relatively deserted place. And still, we have thousands of people coming to be healed and to hear him. It kind of seems like it's about to come out of nowhere. He's been wandering around, and nobody's really been bothering them. There was the one scene where he had, the one episode where he had a lot of people coming, and they stood in an orderly line, and they just all visited Jesus one by one. So there was that. He's known in the show, but he doesn't seem to have like the superstar level of fame that the Sermon on the Mount implies in Scripture. We'll see how it plays out, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think I am inclined to appreciate the idea that Jesus prepared well and prepared thoroughly for his sermons, because I street preach, and I have street preached alongside a few people, more than a few, who would just wing it with very little preparation. And it happens to all of us. We say a comment and think, wow, I hope that didn't give the wrong theological implication, which it probably didn't to people not listening for that kind of thing. But I've seen people get mad. I've seen people revile in return. It's not good to take ministry into your hands or into your mouth without preparation. So, even just hearing myself say that I appreciate this makes the wheels start to turn. If I'm going to learn from a fictional example of Jesus, even if it is in line with the values of Scripture, how is that not proving the point of the people who say portrayals of Jesus always lead to a second commandment violation? Well, this scene in the show has not convinced me to start encouraging portrayals of Jesus. I still don't. But I just think that the idea that Jesus prepared for his sermons would be something good for us all to think about. Then we get the Pharisees debate amongst themselves more about how dangerous Jesus is or is not. At this point, it almost feels like filler, like the show is procrastinating, like it doesn't know where this plot line is going. Like, when are the Pharisees finally going to be convinced that Jesus, who's claiming to be the Messiah, is a threat to them?
Yeah, you see Shmuel and his buddy, building a case and trying to make contacts and interrogate witnesses, and it's fine. It's not that interesting.
It's not. It started to get a little thin. Now the end of this episode really picks up, but I wasn't impressed with the storytelling in like the second act. But then Jesus is taken in for questioning, and it's like modern cop lingo.
By who?
You're being detained. Yeah, he's by who?
Not by the Pharisees.
There's so many different characters. Yeah, it's by the Romans. Mm-hmm. There's so many different characters at this point. Among the Romans and the Pharisees, it's hard to keep them all straight. There's a new Roman who is kind of like scared of Jesus, and he's talking with Gaius. I think I remembered his name right this time. He's talking with Gaius, who is already... It just feels like Gaius is against Jesus because he knows he has to be. Now, Quintus is just against everybody. And this new Roman, who I wish I could remember his name.
Atticus?
I think so. Yeah, he's telling Gaius about the things that he saw, and he's like, it's one of those big if true things, like, what are we going to do if this guy does turn out to have the upper hand? Mm-hmm. So he and Gaius talk about this a little bit. He's in the room when Quintus interrogates Jesus. So yeah, the Pharisee thing is basically in the same place as it was last episode. So we'll get back to you when we watch the roundtables about all of our speculations as to why the show may be portraying that the way that it is. As for the Romans, there hasn't been much escalation. It's just now suddenly they're noticing, and they have questions. And the amusing part is the modern cop lingo, like, you're being detained. We just want to bring you in for questioning. And I think there's a bit where Peter's like, not arrested, detained, because the disciples are obviously concerned, and Andrew in particular starts to just freak out. Yeah. And he's warning other people who have witnessed Jesus' miracles, don't talk about it.
Mm-hmm. This is because of what just happened to John.
Yes, yeah. So if you've listened to our past few episodes, John has been arrested. We have a whole bunch of complaints about the way John is portrayed, but suffice it to say, he told Jesus he was going to publicly rebuke Herod for his incestuous marriage, or in his incest in-law, if you want to call it that. And so we learn in this episode that has now happened.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually see it happen, which I was kind of hoping we would. But we hear that it's happened. We hear that John is in custody, and we know what's coming next.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody is in a lot of stress right now. So when the Romans start coming around Jesus, all the disciples are confused about what's going to happen. Andrew and Peter get into it, and this time Peter is kind of learning from his prior mistakes, and his defensiveness of Jesus doesn't have to be a bad thing, but the ambitious way that Peter went about it in Scripture, the kind that the kind that made Jesus say, "Get behind me, Satan," that was bad. So in this particular scene, we can tell that Peter is trying to keep it together better than he has in the past. And Andrew is actually the one who's kind of slipping. Yeah. Interesting character arcs that I'm willing to hear out. We know for sure that Peter definitely loses it much worse later on, but we'll see. In this scene, it's Andrew that is kind of panicking everybody, and people have to calm him down.
Yeah.
And then, one of the most riveting story beats in the show so far, Quintus and Jesus. Now, this is not in Scripture, and normally when there's a fictional story beat that heavily involves Jesus, we don't like it.
I don't like it.
Well,
But it was fun to watch.
yeah, I mean, this scene doesn't have a lot theologically at stake. The entertainment comes from Quintus interrogating Jesus, being really intrigued by him, because Quintus has benefited from certain things Jesus has done, like saving the zealot. Okay, that is what Quintus calls flesh, because he's using the fish analogy: eat the flesh, spit out the bones. So you drawing Matthew away from us when he was a talented tax collector and making Rome lots of money, now he's following you, that's a bone. But you converting this zealot that was terrorizing us, that's flesh. So the dialogue of the show has always been very 21st century English, and it's been fun, and the show established that early on, so the anachronism isn't a problem here. Quintus is performed by a great actor who
Is having too much fun.
he brings this role to life. And Jesus kind of sits there and is very chill. He's unfazed because he knows he's going to be crucified down the road. So it's like any leeway he gets now is, momentary. So thankfully, Jesus doesn't wax theological in this scene. He just kind of goes through the motions of the interrogation, and he knows that he's going to give Quintus a whole lot more bones. But he doesn't make things difficult in the moment. He just kind of gets it over with. And then Quintus says, "Please don't make me kill you." And Jesus says, "I won't make you do anything. My Father, on the other hand." That was an interesting line. I don't know if there's any significance to it. I at first, the playful Theobro in me was like, it's Arminianism, and then it was like, it's Calvinism. It's probably nothing to actually read into.
Yeah. I don't like the existence of this plot point. I think it just really messes with the story. This idea that Jesus has caught the Romans' attention so strongly at this point in the story that they detained him. Just stop with the made-up stuff. Even though, you're right, the scene was entertaining, the performances, all that. Even the dialogue. Kind of fun. Pretty fun. Get it out of here. We don't need this. We don't need it to be fun. Just stick to Scripture. But whatever.
Yeah, and I'm fine with it at this point in the story. But, I mean, it did have that Coen Brothers offbeat comedy feel to it. And the closer we get to Jesus' crucifixion, I don't want humor in that. If this was like an episode before Jesus was about to be crucified, I would say that's irreverent and that's wildly disrespectful. At this point in the story, I think it's fine, and of course I'm not making it like some metric about how close it is story wise. I'm just saying let's not forget that, yes, it's funny to watch Quintus lord himself over Jesus and Jesus sit there humbly, because we all know that Jesus is God. He knows that the Romans are going to crucify him. He knows that he's going to rise from the dead and conquer the Romans and the Pharisees and every other empire known to man. And here is this little Roman soldier acting like Dracula, cackling. There is an element of jubilant humor in that we laugh and rejoice that Jesus has triumphed. Thou mayest smile at all thy foes. So I didn't mind being able to watch the scene that way. And also just the kind of satirical edge on the way that it portrayed the Roman Empire. I can justify the humorous aspect in this scene. I know that Dallas Jenkins has displayed a lack of reverence before about the crucifixion. Particularly in a tweet where the Mormon controversy was being talked about. Now, we will get to that in the next season because that's where it becomes most relevant, but it's common knowledge. The show started out with Angel Studios, which is Mormon owned. And so for a long time, people were saying, well, how are we to assume that there will not be Mormon influence in the show? And I don't think that we've found any. We've been looking. I don't think it's come up yet.
I was agreeing with you.
Okay. Yeah. There is a scene in one particular scene in season 3 that just made the whole controversy blow up. So, stay tuned. But when talking about that controversy, Dallas Jenkins said, I don't remember if it was a tweet or a comment. I will, of course, find it and put it on the screen so you guys can all see it. But he said that he thought it would be a fun troll moment if Jesus was on the cross and Joseph Smith walked by and Jesus winked at him. Now, not only is that kind of disrespectful conceptually and also not very funny, but Dallas Jenkins had to put Jesus on the cross for that joke. Almost like it feels like he was intentionally doubling down on how sacrilegious he could make it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just when I think of things like that, it makes me concerned for how the show might handle certain subject matter.
I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. I also think that we could tie this back to the thing that keeps coming up about the Pharisees. All right. We agreed to watch the roundtables before we comment much more about the Pharisees, but we didn't say we wouldn't comment about the Romans.
It's true.
And because the Pharisees are taking such a long time to start ganging up on Jesus, which didn't happen in Scripture, why are we seeing the Romans suddenly just all pounce on him like this before the Pharisees do? When in Scripture it was actually the other way around. Jesus is about to be crucified, and the Pharisees have to convince the Romans to crucify him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is what happened in Scripture. So, I mean, maybe the show portrays it that way, but if it does, I don't see how that makes sense with the inversion here.
Yeah.
There would have to be kind of a roller coaster of thought for both parties in the show in order to get there. Which could happen.
Yeah.
I'm not I don't lack confidence in the writer's ability because generally the storytelling is pretty smart and the twists work. Yeah, I'm just saying I'm seeing a pattern here that I don't like.
You're right. Yeah.
The show's not over yet.
What we've been speculating about them downplaying the opposition that the Pharisees had toward Jesus. Now they're playing up the opposition that the Romans had toward Jesus. I don't know.
And it's noticeable here, going off of our theory in the last episode about the show wanting to curb potential anti-Semitic misconceptions. It's starting to get more and more noticeable that the Romans are mayonnaise white. Like these guys would go to a craft mayonnaise festival. That's how white they are. And then accurately, the Jewish characters are, well, they look like they're from that part of the world. And so no issue with that initially, but just I can't help but wonder. I'm not making accusations. I just can't help but wonder if this is, if this is like a leftist pivot, or perhaps just an attempt to shield the show from people misinterpreting it as racist or whatnot, which would be, again, I said this before, but it would be really dumb if the show was afraid of that.
Yeah. Well, we'll check the roundtables.
Yes.
See if they have a comment.
Yeah. I didn't even want to bring this up because why would I want to go here? But at this point, it feels like it would make enough sense to say it out loud.
Say what out loud?
Just all the theories.
Oh, everything you already said?
Yeah, the
I thought you were about to drop a bomb, dude.
No. Just no. I didn't want this. I didn't want this podcast to be political. But when I notice this many things, this is one plausible explanation that I get. I'm not saying that I'm right about it. I hope I'm not. I hope that all these theories get disproved. And then maybe there's something in the round table that I can be like, well, okay, I don't agree, but it's understandable now. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of theories as to why the show could be inverting the events of Scripture this way. And this is one of them. And I'm just saying I think it's logical enough for me to say it out loud, even if I'd rather avoid politics on the show. Yeah. So hopefully it goes away soon. But it's been 3 episodes now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And now that it's just 3 episodes of this weird dynamic with the Pharisees. Now that we're bringing the Romans into it, I don't even know when we're going to get out of this. This one may be for the long haul. Any other thoughts on this episode from you two? There was a little bit of after the interrogation scene. There were a couple other scenes that were kind of like an outro, but I don't quite recall what happened in them. Jesus came back, and then everybody was relieved. That's basically the extent of it.
Yeah,
and he warns the disciples that things are going to get worse for them, which is true. That that happened in Scripture. There's a little bit more talk about the upcoming sermon. Mm-hmm. And then the show ends with Jesus waking up Matthew so they can work on the sermon together. I assume that's setting something up for what's going to start the next episode. Mm-hmm. So, all right, on that note, please join us again next week as we review that episode as well as some of these roundtables. And until then, thanks for watching, and grace and peace.